The Mask in the Attic. It all started on a rainy evening. The Pig family gathered at home, but something was wrong. Peppa was playing with her dolls in her room. Suddenly, she heard a strange creak from above. George was building a tower with blocks downstairs. The sound repeated, as if someone was walking in the attic. Mummy Pig was cooking dinner in the kitchen. She also heard the footsteps and frowned. Daddy Pig was reading a newspaper in the living room. The creaking became louder and more persistent. Peppa approached her parents with frightened eyes. "Mummy, who is walking up there?" Mummy Pig looked at the ceiling anxiously. "It's probably just the old house creaking." But the sounds didn't stop all night. The family went to bed, but no one could sleep. In the morning, Peppa decided to go up to the attic. She slowly opened the hatch in the ceiling. The attic was dark and dusty. In the corner stood an old chest covered with cobwebs. Peppa carefully approached the chest. Inside lay a white mask with empty eye sockets. The mask was cold and strangely heavy. Peppa took it in her trembling hooves. Suddenly, the mask began to glow with a faint blue light. Peppa got scared and dropped it. The mask fell to the floor and cracked. Strange mist flowed from the crack. The mist enveloped the entire attic in a thick veil. Peppa couldn't see anything anymore. She tried to find the exit, but the hatch had disappeared. The attic walls became endless. Shadows appeared in the mist, silhouettes of unknown figures. They slowly approached Peppa. The shadows began to whisper something incomprehensible. Their voices sounded like echoes from a deep well. Peppa screamed, but her voice disappeared. She ran, but the shadows were everywhere. Downstairs, the family heard strange sounds. George started crying, and the parents ran upstairs. They found the attic empty and cold. Peppa was nowhere to be seen. On the floor lay fragments of the white mask. They were still glowing faintly. Mummy Pig picked up a fragment. It was icy cold and burned her fingers. In the fragment reflected Peppa's face. She was somewhere far away and calling for help. Since then, every night the family hears footsteps. Peppa tries to return home but cannot find her way back from the world of shadows. Peppa Pig and the disappearance of George. The day began like any other. Peppa and George were playing in the garden. They laughed, jumped in puddles, and looked for worms. Peppa turned away for a moment to get the ball, and George was gone. She called out his name. No response. At first, she thought he was hiding. She searched the entire garden. Nothing. The house, empty. Only silence and the soft echo of her hooves. Peppa opened the basement door. They weren't usually allowed down there. The light flickered, the walls were damp, and every sound echoed ominously. But no George. Only an old bike and cobwebs. The school. She rushed to her classroom. Madame Gazelle was reading a book, but her voice sounded distant, flat. Peppa asked about George. Madame Gazelle blinked and said, "You don't have a brother, Peppa." The attic. The creaky ladder moaned beneath her. Boxes, forgotten toys, and a mirror. In the reflection, Peppa stood alone. Even the room behind her was empty in the glass. She went to Granny and Grandpa's house. They greeted her warmly, but when she asked about George, Grandpa frowned. "Who's that?" he asked. Granny just shook her head. Back home, Mummy Pig was baking a pie, Daddy Pig reading his paper. Peppa shouted, "Where's George?" They only exchanged glances and smiled. "You must be tired, dear," said Mummy. "You've always had such imagination," added Daddy. Peppa ran to the treehouse. Empty. Leaves rustled. The air was colder. Then she heard it. "Peppa, this way." Voices from the woods behind the house, whispering like wind through the trees. The forest grew darker. Branches creaked. "Peppa, straight ahead. Now left." The voices guided her. They didn't comfort, but they didn't scare her either. First, she met a spider. Massive, but not hostile. It stared with 6 black eyes. "He is below," it said, "where it's cold, where there are stones." Then a ghost, transparent, with a kind face. It pointed with a hoof. "Go past the mist. You'll hear him there." Beyond the mist stood a tall rock. Inside, a dark cave. The cold seeped into her skin. Then she heard George's voice. "Peppa, I'm here." She stepped inside. The walls pulsed faintly. In the center, a stone where George was tied. He was crying. His eyes were dim, his clothes covered in dust. Peppa untied the ropes. The cave trembled. Rocks cracked along the walls. They ran through the forest. The voices whispered behind them. "Don't forget." They made it back home. Everything seemed normal again. The next morning, Peppa awoke next to George. He slept peacefully, holding a small stone from the cave. Since then, she never asked where he had been. Peppa Pig and the zombies in the yard. One morning, Peppa woke up to a strange noise outside. George was still asleep. She got out of bed and looked out the window. Grandpa Pig stood motionless in the garden. His skin was greenish, his eyes cloudy, and his clothes torn. Peppa went downstairs and called for Mummy, but Mummy Pig had changed too. She walked slowly, her head tilted, and dark drool dripped from her mouth. Daddy sat on the couch, his eyes empty, and one leg dragged behind him. Peppa ran to Susie's house, but Susie was strange too. She wandered the yard, her dress ripped, arms stretched forward. No one spoke. No one smiled. The whole town seemed frozen. All of Peppa's friends wandered in circles, as if searching for something. Rebecca Rabbit scratched at a door. Danny Dog clawed the dirt, and Miss Gazelle stood in front of the school without blinking. Peppa hid in the treehouse. She trembled, not knowing what to do. Growls and rustling surrounded her. The zombies didn't notice her as long as she stayed quiet. Night fell. The full moon lit the yard. The zombies gathered around the tree. George came too. He lifted his head. His skin had turned gray, his eyes cloudy, and his toy dinosaur dragged behind him. Peppa screamed. The zombies turned, but no one approached. They just stared. Then, one by one, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist. In the morning, everything was quiet. Peppa stepped out of the treehouse. No one was there. The yard was empty. Only George's toy dinosaur lay on the grass. Since then, Peppa never calls anyone by name, and she never looks into the eyes of someone who stays silent too long. Peppa Pig and the werewolf curse. It all started one strange night. The moon was especially large and bright. Peppa woke up to howling outside her window. She looked out and saw Daddy Pig standing on the lawn, his eyes glowing, mouth slightly open, and steam rising from it. He let out a guttural growl. In the morning, everything looked normal. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. Mummy was cooking breakfast. But they had strange scratches on their arms, and their eyes avoided Peppa's. George sat quietly, drawing circles in the air. Each day, things got creepier. Mummy Pig began eating raw meat. George scratched at the doors at night. Daddy Pig no longer spoke, only growled. On the third night, Peppa woke to loud howling beneath her window. She looked out. Her family stood in the yard. Their bodies were covered in coarse fur, their eyes animalistic, their hands clawed. Peppa stifled a scream. In the morning, they acted as if nothing had happened. But Peppa knew this wasn't her family, or not anymore. She went to Grandma and Grandpa's, but they were oddly silent too. In the shed, Peppa found Grandpa's torn jacket and claw marks on the door. The curse had spread. Peppa knew she had to act. In an old book hidden in the attic, she found mention of a witch who lived beyond forests and seas, able to lift ancient curses. The next morning, while the family still slept, she packed her bag and left. First came the foggy forest. Peppa wandered among trees, hearing whispers. Shadows moved on their own. One voice whispered, "You seek the one who knows." go to the river. At the river, swamp creatures with glowing green eyes blocked her path. They wouldn't let her pass until she solved the riddle carved into stone. What lives without a body, speaks without a mouth, and moves without legs? An echo, Peppa said, and the path opened. Next, the sea of darkness. Her boat rocked on black water. The sky vanished, everything turned gray. Hands reached from the water, but Peppa looked only forward. A voice in her head said, "You won't return the same." On a distant shore stood an old house. Inside, the witch, her face woven from shadow, her eyes glowing violet. She listened silently to Peppa's story. "There is a cure," she whispered, "but the way back is harder. They will be waiting." Peppa received a small violet vial. It pulsed in her hoof. The way back was filled with traps. The forest darker, the sea deeper, and shadows whispered her name. At home, her family waited. They stood on the lawn, now fully werewolves. Their glowing eyes and claws dug into the ground. But when Peppa raised the vial, they froze. Drop by drop, to Daddy, to Mummy, to George, to Grandma and Grandpa. Their bodies trembled, fur faded, and their eyes became human once more. Peppa said nothing. She just hugged George tightly. He hugged back. A single tear glistened on his cheek. Since then, on every full moon, the whole family goes to bed early. And Peppa always checks if the vial is still in its place. A sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. But today, something was off. A subtle, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Susie Sheep stood on the doorstep, but her gaze was unusually blank, her movements stiff. She didn't smile, as always, nor jump with joy. Peppa and George, usually so cheerful, froze. Their eyes widened in bewilderment. Mummy Pig slowly approached the door, her face pale. Daddy Pig, usually so brave, hid behind the sofa. He trembled, his snout twitching with fear. Susie entered the house without a word. Her steps were heavy, each sound echoing. She slowly turned her head, her eyes fixed on Peppa. Peppa felt a chill. Susie extended her hand, her fingers pale and cold. She held something small and black. It was a doll resembling Peppa, but the doll had empty eye sockets and a crooked smile. George cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. Mummy Pig hugged the children tightly. Susie slowly lifted the doll. She began to make strange, whispering sounds. It wasn't Susie's voice. Daddy Pig darted from behind the sofa, grabbed his children and wife. They ran out of the house without looking back. Susie remained standing. She watched them go, her empty eyes following their every move. The doll in her hand swayed slowly. The sun disappeared behind the clouds. Peppa Pig's house, usually so cozy, now seemed ominous. Inside, a quiet, eerie laugh echoed. Peppa's family ran without a glance. Peppa Pig. The attic doll. A sunny day lit up Peppa Pig's house, filling it with the usual laughter. Mummy Pig was cooking in the kitchen, and Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper. Everything was normal, almost. But a strange tension was floating in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Susie Sheep was standing outside, but her eyes looked empty, and her movements were stiff. She wasn't smiling or jumping with joy like she usually did. Meanwhile, Peppa and George were playing in the attic and found a strange box. The box was old, dusty, and covered in mysterious symbols. George pulled on it. It fell and opened. Inside was a doll. Not like any of their other toys, it looked old, with bright red hair and a creepy smile. Peppa felt a small chill. George, not scared, picked up the doll. It was heavy and cold to the touch. Its eyes seemed to follow their every move. That night, the doll sat on the shelf in George's room. Moonlight came through the window, lighting up its face. George was asleep, but the doll was not. Its glowing eyes stared at him all night. The next day, Daddy Pig noticed strange things. His tools were scattered around the garage. Mummy Pig saw that her favorite flower had died. Peppa and George noticed their toys were moving on their own. The doll sat in plain sight. Its face changed slightly every time. Its smile grew wider. Daddy Pig shook his head, confused. Mummy Pig sighed, trying to find an answer. Susie Sheep came to visit, but she acted strange. She didn't want to play. She just stared at the doll. At one point, the doll appeared on the TV screen. Susie couldn't look away. She began saying strange things. Peppa and George got scared. Susie grabbed the doll. It started laughing. Susie collapsed. Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig tried to understand what was happening. The doll's presence was everywhere. Daddy Pig tried to throw it away. It resisted. Its eyes turned red. The doll hit Daddy Pig. He cried out in pain. It fell, but stood up again quickly. That night, the doll crept into Peppa's bedroom. She was asleep, unaware. The doll moved closer to the bed. Its tiny hands reached out. Peppa felt a chill. She opened her eyes. The doll was standing right in front of her. Its smile was terrifying. Peppa screamed. The doll jumped onto the bed. Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig ran in. They saw the doll holding Peppa tightly. Daddy Pig grabbed it. It fought back. Mummy Pig called the police. The doll broke free and ran through the house. The police arrived, but the doll hid. The officer searched the house, but found nothing. Peppa and George were terrified. The doll watched them from the shadows. Its laughter echoed through the house. After the police left, it returned, its eyes glowing. The Pig family decided to leave. They packed their things. The doll hid inside the luggage. No one noticed. The car started moving. The doll smiled. Its plan had worked. The family left with the doll. The doll ate the entire Pig family. Now it rides alone down an empty road. The sun is setting. Its eyes glow. It's waiting. New victims will come soon. Its laughter echoes again. It's alone, but not for long. Peppa Pig and the Diary That Didn't Exist. One day, Peppa and George were playing in Grandpa Pig's attic. Among the old boxes, Peppa found a thin black diary. It was dusty, but looked almost new. Inside, the pages were neatly filled with tidy handwriting. Peppa opened the diary and read, "Tomorrow I will find this diary." She was surprised. That was happening right now. She decided to take it with her. The next day, a new line appeared in the diary. "Today, Mummy will drop a cup." An hour later, Mummy Pig really did drop a cup in the kitchen. Peppa froze. The diary seemed to know the future. The entries continued. Every evening, Peppa found new lines. "Susie won't come to play. Daddy will lose his glasses." Everything came true exactly. But one day, the diary said, "Tonight the mirror will open, and Peppa will disappear." Peppa turned pale. She covered the mirror with a blanket and put the diary in a drawer. But she couldn't sleep. That night, she woke up to a rustling sound. The mirror was uncovered, the blanket on the floor. Her reflection was gone, only a dark hallway in the glass, and a figure that looked like Peppa with lifeless eyes. Peppa screamed. Mummy and Daddy ran in. She showed them the diary, but all the pages were blank. Since then, Peppa never goes to the attic. But one day, George found the same diary under her bed. He opened it and read, "Now you are next."